Good afternoon, Tobago. My fellow Tobagonians on island and wherever you are in the world listening to this very important conversation about safety, security, and the peace of our people and our island. I think it was critically important and necessary that I have this island addressed following the murder of our ninth citizen for the year. On Wednesday night of May 15th, the island experienced its second murder in the village of Plymouth in 7 days. And earlier today, there was a chopping incident at the entrance to Dutch Fort in Scarborough. 2 weeks ago, we saw the murder of a young mother whose body was tossed in a ditch in the hills of Mount St. George. Relatedly, there was a series of shootings in my home village of Speyside, with some of this shooting activity happening in the vicinity of my father's house in Lucyville. I even had my cousin that I grew up with in Speyside and who lives on the same parcel of land as my father, picking up a bullet wound by just liming on a Friday night by the Nines in Speyside. Why am I taking such great effort to overshare my family is running with criminal elements? It's because I want all of Tobago to appreciate that we are all affected. Every single one of us is affected by the increased levels of criminality. It is also important that I note here that illegal firearms are the weapons being used to execute these murders and other serious injuries in our peaceful, loving, and quiet communities. Recently, after writing the Prime Minister in January of this year for a Tobago-specific security meeting, one was given with the Minister of National Security. At that meeting, which included the Commissioner of Police and other representatives from other arms of our national security apparatus, I raised the critically important issue of border security on the island. I even raised the example of 2 young fishermen who got in trouble at sea, spent essentially 12 hours in the water, and had to be rescued by Venezuelan fishermen fishing in our waters, and fisher folk from Castara and Palatavere had to informally retrieve their fellow villagers. That is a problem, because that signals that our borders are porous. And so, fellow Tobagonians, the emerging culture of gun violence and murder on our island is by all definitions and descriptions an invading lethal assault on our peaceful, caring, and loving way of living, and for which we have been the regional and might say the global envy. It is our peaceful, caring, and loving character that has promoted and sustained our annual community harvest festivals across every village, where Tobagonians and visitors alike go from house to house and are entertained with food and beverages without even being asked our names. Relatedly, Tobago is an island of tightly knitted villages that naturally come together to bury loved ones, marry their sons and daughters, and bless and celebrate new births. In fact, our families are larger than the size of our villages. This is the human bedrock of our people and the social character of our island that is now under threat. Therefore, illegal firearms and ammunition constitute a real and moving lethal threat to every Tobagonian everywhere on the island and to the socio-economic development of Tobago. It is with this understanding of the current and emerging situation that I am issuing this call to action to every Tobagonian. We have to come together in homes, villages, communities, workplaces, social spaces, and places of worship, and collectively defeat this invading evil of gun violence and murders. We will come together to the extent where I will lead by example. A week ago, I had an informal conversation with the minority leader, and we agreed that we will meet together with other stakeholders, and at a time appropriate, we will address you together, because Tobago's approach and response to increasing levels of criminality must be exemplary and markedly different from what we see happening with our neighbors in Trinidad. Inaction is no longer an option available to any Tobagonian anywhere. Our first step is collective action. Our first step requires all of us to come to a mental place where we are decisively prepared and ready to quietly give to law enforcement anyone who we know that has illegal firearms on the island. And yes, this might be hard, but it calls for auntie, granny, nene, mommy, daddy, whoever you be. Now is the time to mature with a purpose. Pick up the phones and quietly, confidentially report those in our communities who are exhibiting antisocial behaviors. Our collective public safety and security dictates that we discharge this social control mandate without giving consideration to who the offender is. I know that it will be extremely difficult and challenging for some of us to take action against our own children, husbands, relatives, and friends. But our safety and that of our entire island depends on us doing the right thing and the correct thing. This is the occasion that requires us to make righteousness a much greater priority than relationships. Because to do otherwise means that you are prepared to, one, normalize gun violence and murders in Tobago, which we cannot allow to happen. Two, to knowingly live in the presence of real and moving lethal threats to the lives of every Tobagonian, including your own and that of your loved ones. And three, to exchange social and economic development of Tobago and Tobagonians for gun violence and murders. To strengthen the socially enabling environment for us to take collective actions against those who we know have illegal firearms in our communities, the Tobago House of Assembly will do the following. We will immediately reinstate the Tobago Community Safety Program with the tagline, "When you are safe, I am safe." The Community Safety Program will be implemented and managed by the Division of Community Development, Youth Development, and Sport, and deliver the following projects. One, the mobilizing, organizing, and empowering of our communities to collectively and effectively participate in the promotion and management of the safety and security of their communities. Two, the establishing of community services, support secretariats in all community centers and multipurpose facilities. The Secretariat will operate daily, providing technical and administrative support to members of the community and the village council. It will also serve as a point of contact between the THA and the community. Three, the building of trust and confidence pathways between our communities and the law enforcement agents, which is critical to call for collective action against gun violence and murders. Next, we will look at developing and operationalizing co-created community safety plans designed and engineered on the unique risk profile of each community. Then we will be developing community safety rallies and events. These are public relations and public communication events that will ensure that communities have an appreciation for how to remain safe and secure in this century. And finally, we'll look at the registering of all unemployed persons in communities with the aim of ascertaining their core skills and capabilities and training option needs. And let me say this, while we are doing that, we are very much aware that the THA cannot employ everyone on the island. But research has shown that the correlation between those who are unemployed and those involved in criminal activity might be smaller than we think. Notwithstanding, we will generate this database. We will provide the training options where the gaps exist, and we will help young people get gainfully employed with the THA or with other agencies in the private sector, and also through entrepreneurship to ensure that they are productively engaged. In fact, what we want is that those who prefer to sell weed, for example, trust weed from a drugsman elsewhere to sell in the community, will trade that kind of business for a much more legitimate business in the distribution sector. In addition, in the medium to long term, the THA will establish the Department of Public Safety in the Office of the Chief Secretary. In fact, this establishment is pretty advanced, as in we have done the necessary feasibility work, we have done all the planning in terms of designing the structure and the infrastructure that will be related to the Department of Public Safety, and we are approaching the point where we are ready to roll out this department. This department will amalgamate all the units, agencies, and departments of the THA that have core public safety functions, including TEMA, game wardens, lifeguards, environment police, to name a few. The long-awaited THA police, along with traffic wardens and litter wardens, will constitute the new additions. I'm happy and pleased to note here that the legal review for the establishment of the THA police has been completed and the path is clear for its implementation. Given the current legal construct where the THA has virtually no legal remit over national security on the island, my administration is unconditionally committed to working with our national law enforcement agencies to effect whatever fixes are necessary to improving their functional and operational effectiveness and efficiency. In this regard, I will continue the ongoing collaborative works with the Office of the Commissioner of Police towards ensuring an operational presence for some of the key specialized units on the island. There are also significant fixes to be done to the entire criminal justice system, which comprises in the main the police, the judiciary, and prisons. While these entities are legal entities outside the remit of the THA, the importance of the roles they play in the promotion and protection of public safety and citizen security dictate that I reach out to them with the aim of contributing in whatever way to the improvements to their efficiency and effectiveness. Fellow Tobagonians, I am close to concluding this address to you, and so I want to remind all of us that the sustainability of our safety and security can only be built on a strong foundation of collective social action against criminals and criminal conduct wherever we know they exist. Knowingly not taking action against those who are among us with illegal firearms and ammunition and who are using these illicit items to murder and maim our members and our brothers and sisters constitute a betrayal of the ideals that define us as Tobagonians. To do otherwise is to be anti-Tobagonian, perhaps even pseudo-Tobagonian. And if you are anti-Tobagonian or pseudo-Tobagonian, look for elsewhere to live. But once you're living in Tobago, we have to take action now. Action is required now, and is required by all of us. I will now take questions from members of the media who have joined me for this briefing.
Good afternoon, Chief Secretary.
Yes, thank you.
The Department of Public Safety that you just spoke about, you said you all are ready to roll out the department. How soon are we looking at?
The fiscal comes to an end in September, and we are looking to have the rollout before the end of this fiscal year. What we did is that we took the time to do the feasibility study, to have legal do all of the necessary legal preparatory work. We identified the physical space at Fairfield Complex where this department will exist. We also created the structure for the department and have the due authorization from the Executive Council. And so we are looking at between now and the end of the fiscal, getting all the additional staff in place, the expert staff in place, so that we can begin those activities. So within this fiscal, we started on the Department of Safety and Security. We have completed all the preparatory work, so we are prepared to roll out within the remaining months of this fiscal year.
With regards to CCTV surveillance cameras, I attended a police town meeting, I think it was a month or two ago, where the ACP in charge of Tobago would have called on the Tobago House of Assembly to equip their buildings with CCTV footage. Is that something that is being discussed? Is that something that is happening?
Well, the ACP could have only made that call because he has been party to the Tobago Security Council meetings that we have had. And I am to meet with him again on Monday. And the intent is to use the properties of the THA as points by which we can have additional CCTV camera infrastructure that will feed into our main database so that we can do the proper monitoring of our streets and our surroundings, and so that we can respond to criminal activity in a timely manner. But that's as much I'm prepared to say now on that, because as you would appreciate, that sort of infrastructure requires some measure of confidentiality for it to be effective in terms of treating with the criminals on island.
I know the Tobago House of Assembly budget is expected to be read soon. With all the items that you would have listed here to help reduce crime and criminality on the island, is it that we are going to see a larger cut for public community development?
That's very much possible. And in fact, the meeting I was in that I paused to be here is a budget meeting for which we are doing some reprioritization. And as soon as that meeting wraps up, I am meeting with the new administrator and secretary of that division so that some of their execution will be in line with this priority. By the way, the THA budget is constitutionally required in the month of June. And by the last day of June, I am required to submit to the Ministry of Finance the THA's draft estimates, save and except if there is an incident on island that prevents us from doing so. And that would be something like hurricane or some disaster of some sort that would prevent us from physically or electronically submitting those draft estimates. But other than that, saving that, the budget as is required by law can be expected in the month of June.
In light of the present situation with respect to crime, Mr. Chief, are you expecting or hopeful to have a one-on-one meeting with the Prime Minister?
Well, I still hold out hope that will happen. As I said, I wrote him in January asking for us to meet on the matter. In his absence, he was out of country at the time. I met with the Minister of National Security and a huge team, and that was in last month, in the month of April. And so I'm hopeful that at some point we will have that conversation, because the Prime Minister remains the head of the National Security Council. In his letter, he acknowledged to me that he is well aware that Tobago is experiencing unprecedented and elevated levels of criminal activity, rather gun violence to be specific. And so I think with that acknowledgement, I should perhaps hold out a little hope that we will have that conversation. And it's in keeping with Act 40 of 1996 that requires that the Prime Minister and the Chief Secretary have regular meetings.
Okay. There's a situation in terms of patrols on the streets where criminals might be timing these blue lights, telling each other, blue lights come in, don't come out now. And sometimes crime happens after the blue lights leave. In terms of patrols, have you spoken to the ACP with respect to that?
Well, I'm meeting with the ACP on Monday, and that's one of the issues I plan on raising with him. But what you are getting at is a matter of how to do intelligent policing. And I'm afraid we have not always had intelligent policing in this country. And I'm saying that without necessarily targeting any police official or leadership within the TTPS for the criticism. But I feel as though sometimes we don't get a strategic kind of response from the TTPS in terms of how they operate. And I will go further to say this. The strategy cannot be roadblocks everywhere. Roadblocks in my mind are not as efficient as they used to be in the days when there were 2 phones in the entire village and we were going by some old lady somewhere to use their landline. In this day and age with WhatsApp and everybody having a smartphone and most people on island having access to data, motorists don't even need to blink their lights to approaching cars to signify that there's a roadblock ahead. People know that there are roadblocks ahead. And the way roadblocks should happen, I think, is that it should be sporadic. It should also be for a short period of time. So you set up a roadblock, 10, 15 minutes, you get up and just move to another location. Because after a while, it becomes very much ineffective. And I think law-abiding citizens are being frustrated that we're just being held up. We are keeping the law, but we are being held up because they want to check license, insurance, give a ticket so that they raise more taxes, raise more money for Imbert and them down at Ministry of Finance. But in reality, we continue to see elevated levels of criminal activity, which says to me that there's no correlation between these roadblocks and reduction in criminal activity. So I'm just saying generally, there is a need for intelligent policing and strategic policing. And I'm saying that without being critical necessarily of the current leadership of the TTPS.
Just another question. This one is long-standing. The scanners on the ports. Because I know in your head, Mr. Chief Secretary, you are asking yourself, where are these guns coming from in Tobago? It's like you can get a gun at any corner of Tobago. Someone feel to just shoot up the place, they just shoot up the place.
Right. So in that meeting I had with the Minister of National Security, the Port Authority was one of those entities in that meeting. They assured us that the tender process at that time was already in train for scanners. The scanners will be placed at the port in Scarborough because they indicated that they don't have the space at the port in Port of Spain for those scanners. We're talking about vehicular scanners that can scan you as you drive through so that we can manage what comes in through the port. So that is already in train, meaning it's budgeted for. The tender is out, and very soon the Port Authority, I guess, will decide on a broker and have this scanner come to island and be installed. So that's already in place. But you are right. Tobago, North Trinidad manufactures guns. So those are all coming in either through our legal port of entry or they're coming in illegally through our open borders. And so all of the measures I spoke about the community getting involved, about people reporting fellow villagers who they know have illegal guns and so on, all of those are really reactions to criminal activity. If we really need to be proactive, it has to start with stemming the inflow of illegal guns. Because if we are not doing that, we are just asking people to tell the police when they see a gun that is illegal, call the police and report who they see shoot whomever. The criminal activity is already in train at the time of the report. And so to be proactive really and truly, we really need the national security apparatus to work. Even in that meeting with Minister Hines, we discussed the lack of access to Coast Guard vessels in Tobago. And we are sure that they were doing some fixes to the vessels that they have at Chaguaramas, and one will be available to Tobago shortly. But that is extremely, extremely critical. if it is we are to stem the flow, in all honesty. But while we work on that with the central government, those items, the scanners, border patrol, and all of those things, I want to keep reminding villagers that you have a responsibility to play. And you know, when you go to Mariah Heritage, the village Mako is celebrated in the old time wedding. But and it's not an art form, it's not a trait that we like to celebrate, right? Because we don't really want too much commercial people around and in our business. But here is when it's needed, because it is your business if your neighbor is hiding guns under a cocoa tree somewhere or in a backyard. It is your business if you go to clean out your son's room and you bounce up on an illegal weapon. It is your business. Because if you don't make it your business now, it might become your business when your son or daughter is lying in the street in cold blood. So make it your business now. And I'm saying that there are, in fact, avenues that people can make those reports quietly, safely, without being targeted. All you need to do is talk to the right people and keep your mouth shut. And you don't need to tell people who you are. You don't need to identify yourself when you are reporting information, but report the information that you have. It's critical, but you have to take charge of your community. It can't just be area reps. It can't be that it's in and say, but what is the government doing? Crime out of control. What are you doing? You can't encourage it, and you can't benefit because your sons are taking the boats that they should be using to go fishing for fish, to go fishing for drugs to come in, sell, and turn over a profit. And you are happy because you're able to afford an extension to the house, you're able to pay off your bill at courts. That should not be how we operate. The Tobago I know is a Tobago where people like honest work for honest day's wage. The Tobago I know is a Tobago where we understand that godliness with contentment is great gain. And so even all I have is the proceeds from an early morning walk, as we call it, that I make do with that. I am here as a product of somebody who sweep the roads on morning for a living. And my father never sell drugs, bring in illegal gun, thief nothing from nobody in order to mind the family. We live within our means, and we live with what we had as a family, until eventually my mother got a job and the income was further supplemented. But that's the Tobago I know. That's all of our story. You go from village to village and you find families who build their homes piece by piece. If you go by where I live in Speyside, the house still not finished. It's still in paint. It's still a board house, board on top, concrete down below. It's still unfinished because it's almost like a lifelong project, because we are an island of people who take little and make the most out of what we have. And when you look around the island, you see Tobagonians who have really nice homes, really successful businesses, birthed out of using just what they have. And what we are seeing now is a shift in the culture. We are having some of these young men trying to take drugs on consignment from bigger drug lords, try to turn it around for a profit in Tobago, not paying the bigger drug lords that they took the drugs on consignment from, and then people are calling hits on them because they owe this one money and owe that one money. And I'm not saying that that's always the case, because you will have exceptions to the rule. And the unfortunate exception to the rule is that there will always be some innocent bystander who will end up getting hit because they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Look at the shooting that happened in Speyside. And I told you earlier that a cousin of mine who literally, I could stay in my house and call him and he will hear me. That's how close we live. He got shot because they just lime in. Young men just lime in by what we call it nines on a Friday night. Just work week done and they just lime in. You're buying some drinks and they lime in with friends. And some idiots drive by trying to kill one person and shoot up the place who got grazed by a bullet, who is at home and the bullet is not out yet, and all sort of story. We could have had deaths there, as we saw I think in South Trinidad, where there was a similar incident, and they had 4 or 5 that end up dying from a drive-by. And I'm saying, Tobago, this is not just a call for you to report and report friends, family, neighbors, and so on. It's also a reminder that we are losing part of our culture that ought not to be lost. And culture is not just what we see on stage for heritage. It's not just ballet and carnival and winding down the place. That's not just culture. Culture is about how we live. And if it is, we are willing to so easily trade the way we live and what we view as important for a quick dollar, then we will lose our paradise. And I am insistent that paradise will not be lost, certainly not under my watch.
In the past, there have been calls from the Teachers Association for the TAJ to look at violence starting within the schools, because when we think crime, we think violence. And over the past couple of years, we have had an increase in school fights, not only on the compound, but also along the streets. The public awareness campaign that you mentioned earlier, will that be going into Tobago schools as well?
It includes the schools that we have, both private and public. And we have to also appreciate that the work in school requires some effort as well from the teaching fraternity. I was a student and I was a teacher. And I can tell you that classroom and school management starts and ends with the teacher. As a student, we could not even lime in tongue with our school uniform. We couldn't even go in game arcade with our school uniform. I couldn't even venture up by Mirage uptown, where they had some, them street fighter games and thing long time, to say I'm going and play a game in my school uniform. I could go in there and buy a little soft drink, but if I get caught by Sosa and them playing game in town, or even hanging out around where the library is now, right? Which at the time was the bus terminus and the library. Hanging around there and loitering, as they call it. I was getting punished at school for loitering in town. And I went to school between 1996 and I finished sixth form in 2003. We are in 2024. And you are telling me in 2024, we can't have successful management of our young people. And we were getting successful management of our young people between 96 and 2003. I cannot accept that. As a matter of fact, the most important factor in the classroom for student learning is the teacher factor. And so the THA will continue to provide the necessary support for our teachers. That's why we have safety officers in the school. That's why some of our schools have already been equipped with camera systems so that they can have proper monitoring of what happens in and around the compound by the principal and other high-ranking staff members. And we'll continue to provide additional support. It is why when Scarborough's fence, for example, was breaking down, although the school has to be moved, we made it a priority to replace the school fencing, because these sort of infrastructure allow for greater security on the school campuses. And so we have to continue supporting our teachers, and I'm saying it has to be partnership, and not just the teachers and the THA, but the maxi drivers. You are also in charge of doing some of the management and control. The villagers, the community, when you see the school children are wrong, it's not your job to take out a phone and try to videotape it so you could send Elizabeth Williams the video so that we get a video out. It is your job to stop them. We have adults standing by and watching and cheering on and taking video, because everybody wants to be a reporter these days. You are an adult. As adults, we all have to take charge of all our children. The village still raising the child, And it's either we raising good citizens or we're raising some people who will destroy us. And so the village can't sit down and laugh and videotape when children, we have to get involved. We have to get involved and stop them and discipline them. And let me say to some parents, Now is not the time to spoil your child rotten. If you raise your children right, you could spoil your grandchildren. That's the rule. Raise your children right, so you'll be able to spoil your grandchildren. But if you raise your children wrong, you will end up with no grandchildren. Or you will end up having to mind your grandchildren as orphans. So raise your children right, so you could spoil your grandchildren. That is what is required.
Just have one more question.
Sure.
In Trinidad, there is police evidence that criminals are fleeing Trinidad and coming to Tobago for safety. Could you comment on that, and how is Tobago planning to do that? I mean, this is not the first time, we are hearing about this. It has been happening for years. So, comment on that.
Tobagonians by nature are warm, welcoming people. And Tobagonians have an ability, unlike any other, to make the visitor feel at home. You could come here from wherever and we find a way to make you one of us. That's part of the charm of being Tobagonian, to be quite honest. That has to be managed naturally with understanding and appreciating that not every visitor that comes to your door is really an angel. I know the Bible says that you need to entertain visitors peradventure, perchance you entertain an angel unaware. But sometimes you might be entertaining a demon unaware as well. And it might be now might be a good time for Tobagonians to be a bit more intuitive, to ask the hard questions. Who are you? Where you're from? Why are you here? You see them there 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They're just living. They pick up girlfriend, they pick up boyfriend in the village. Ask some questions. Ask some hard questions. And if you are unsure, the TTPS has the ability, based on their database, to do searches on individuals. So part of your reporting might very well mean to go to the TTPS and say, look, I see we have a villager here that, I don't know, they're living here a month now. I don't know where they come from, asking questions, and I ain't getting no answer. Find out now. This is a person name. Do some background research. Find out. They live so by so and so place. Right? Find out. It's part of your duty. I remember when I was a little boy going to the library in Charlottesville. One time I say hate going to the library in Charlottesville. Because as I step out of the bus, the villagers want to know who you be, who you belong to. And I said, well, these people fast. But when they ask me that question. But it's your village. Ask the hard questions. And if you ain't getting the answer, talk to the TTPS. We just have to ask the question. And the reality is, if you're part of a Twin Island Republic, and all you need is your ID card or some photo identification to travel between the both islands, then you will always have the transferal of criminal elements back and forth. But I don't want Tobagonians to sit down and say, well, Tobago is not involved. It's really Trinis coming up and doing the thing. That's not the position I want us to take at all. Because what we have also seen is that a considerable amount of those who were held for previous criminal activities are in fact born, bred, raised Tobagonians. And we have to be mindful of that and take some responsibility, look inwardly, and treat with the matter accordingly. All right, are there, and I know you'll be happy for this, but I will cautiously ask if there are other questions unrelated. Because when I leave here, I will not be having any side interview in any corner. Are there any other questions unrelated to this that you need me to address?
I know you would have answered it yesterday when you spoke to the media in Trinidad in terms of the reshuffle. But what was in terms of looking at the reshuffle itself, why did you decide to touch Pastor Baines than any other secretary or assistant secretary? He was chosen in terms of moving from secretary to an assistant secretary position. Why Pastor Baines?
Well,
why not any other secretary?
I don't know if that's the way to frame the question. You know, the last time I checked, Act 40 of 1996, the Chief Secretary is bestowed with the authority to manage the Executive Council to the extent that the Chief Secretary can move members in, out, and around the Executive Council as is required for the general development of the island. And that has to be at the forefront of my mind. And it's not done with any malice or ill will. It's not done because one is hated and others are liked. Has nothing to do with that. Further to that, you know, I want us, because I've heard some things in this space, and I've heard some people in this space who, quite frankly, might be irrelevant, but trying to find relevance by mouthing off some things to Tobagonians. And I want to remind Tobagonians of some critical things. The last time the Tobago House of Assembly experienced reshuffling and shuffling of an executive, it was not done for the development of Tobago or with the development of Tobago and Tobagonians in mind. It was done because we had an OJT Chief Secretary who wanted to make a power play on behalf of his political leader, and so they bust the throat of Mr. Kelvin Charles and who they feel were associated with Kelvin Charles to bring in who they want, move out who they didn't want, and all of that. And I'm saying that such people I will not take advice from. Because when they had the opportunity, instead of moving people around in order to achieve a greater development success for the island, people were moved around in the most undemocratic fashion to be able to achieve a political end. In this instance, we have moved people around, and I'm saying we, because consistent with the law, consistent with Act 40 of 1996, I met with members privately and collectively, had consultations individually and collectively as the law required before making the decisions. And so the decisions that I made in terms of the movement of people are actually in line with the objectives of the government and what the successes we want from henceforth. More than that, I think the reward for success should be more success. And so what we are saying is that while we have been largely successful as a government, the intent is to increase those levels of success even more. That's the intent, to never be satisfied with the level of success that we have, but to always want more. And if you always want more, then realignment will always happen and can happen at any time. But I assure you, the reason will always be for Tobago's development, for Tobago's growth. It will not be because somebody is hated and I want to set up a political career for somebody else. No. The political organization I lead is a democratic institution and sees island before party and island before self. And that's where we center and focus all of our moves, including a reshuffle.
I know a number of people are looking at it in terms of your new finance secretary. Will that person be coming from within the Tobago House of Assembly or someone from outside?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but let me say this. So I will read the budget in the month of June, and then I will hand over for what is essentially our penultimate fiscal year to a new Secretary of Finance. Subsequent to reading the budget, then I will make the announcement in terms of who the new Secretary of Finance would be. Based on what the law requires, the Secretary must be a citizen, right? And I can assure you the Secretary will be a citizen of Tobago, right? And I will assure you that the new Secretary will be very much associated with the Tobago House of Assembly in one way or the other. Take from that whatever you will. But I assure you, it will be someone who will take us to the next level. And if you look at the strategy we had, over the last 2.5 years, going to 3 years, the objective was to stabilize the government system and to clean up the messes that we have inherited. and it's quite a lot of mess. The pile is quite high. But we have been shoveling, moving away. We have been taking the mess and hopefully turning them into manure and so on, and cleaning up the government system sufficiently. And now the objective will move to another dimension, which will require broadening and deepening of the fiscal measures of the Tobago House of Assembly. And I assure you, who you will get will be very much well qualified and able to execute accordingly.
Would you care to say male or female?
And no, I wouldn't care to say male or female at this time. As a matter of fact, gender isn't important, religion isn't important, none of those things are important, because the law doesn't require that any of those demographics be considered when considering someone for this position.
Yeah, I just have 2 questions. Could I get a comment from you on the incident where a mother and a baby died at the Scarborough General Hospital, and also an update on the Jarek Titans matter?
Let me start with the latter one because that's easy. And it's easy because yesterday, Mr. Brown reached out to me and he indicated that he was still awaiting word from the Chief Administrator's office on the matter. So later today, when I conversate with the Chief Administrator, that will be one of the items I will raise. But I can't give an update in terms of anything else. I know for sure the THA has not spent any money in that direction since. With regards to the mother and the daughter, that one hits home. I taught the mother. I taught the father of the baby. I know the family very well. The family was actually living in Speyside. It is a family that over the last 2 years experienced quite a bit of trauma with deaths in the family. If I can remember, I think it was last year when this young lady's grandmother died. Her grandfather, who was in attendance to the funeral, died there while at the funeral. So while they were burying the grandmother, the grandfather died, and so they had funeral again in about a week or so thereafter. And then in just, I think, a month ago, they had a memorial to celebrate the death of the grandparents. And then we're looking at death of the mother and child. The TRHA has indicated that the matter is being investigated. It has to be investigated because we would certainly like to know what happened and whether or not there is any culpability on the side of public health care system. So we are not shying away from that at all. But certainly we are doing investigations, and when those are completed, the Secretary for Health will brief you on what happened and how we plan to treat with the matter. But let me also say that one, the THA is in fact extending condolences to the family. We are truly sorry for their loss, and we are sympathizing with them, but we also are offering all the assistance that's necessary with what will be required to treat with those deaths now. Whether it's the funeral arrangements or so, we are more or less awaiting the family to make some decisions, but we will provide all the necessary support that we can to them. All right, I want to thank you, Tobago. I want to remind you that we have to act now. I want to remind you that the THA has some actions that it is taking, present continuous, and those actions, I listed them out to you, and I also listed some actions that you in the community should take, and I want you to take those responsibilities seriously. We cannot do it alone. The TTPS cannot do it alone. We really need all hands on deck if it is we are to arrest this situation. So thank you very much. God bless you. Have a safe weekend. Be safe on the islands roads. And perhaps I should just indicate that next week, when I brief you next week, we will spend some time talking about what's happening in terms of water management on the island. We're having those conversations with with WASA as we speak, among some other issues that we have to treat with on island. So thank you very much, and God's richest blessings.